So first I want to thank the Planning Committee, the PDA, the FDA for giving me this opportunity to give you my opinions. But I always like to start, every presentation with a little sense of humor, especially when we're dealing with such a serious topic as quality culture. So someone asked me this morning at lunch today about something, and so I thought, well, I better find out the answer. Is Hal Baseman here? Hal, are you here? Do you have that? You have a Rolex watch that I can see? And for those who don't get that, Hal's in the back of the room. He'll clearly tell you about how I smashed his watch with a sledgehammer one day on stage. But the interesting thing about my presentation, and I'm going to do a lot of freelancing today, so you might not want to download my slides, because what I'm going to say would have been exactly what Eric has said. My slide deck follows very closely to what Eric said, and our quality systems are almost identical, which is interesting because many times when I give this presentation about quality culture and quality systems, there's always people in the audience that says, but I work for a generic company. I can't afford to do what Amgen does. And Eric works for one of the largest generic companies in the world, and he's doing exactly what I've done. So I don't know if he stole it from me or I stole it from him. We'll have to have a drink tonight and determine that. But the reason why we have these quality systems and what I call mature and very strong quality systems is they actually generate revenue for the company. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So in self-disclosure, I got to do a couple things before I talk. I try to be provocative during my presentation. So I may say some things that will make you sit up and listen, might even offend you at some point in time. And I must apologize, I'm not there to offend anybody, but I'm there to get you to think differently. And I also have to disclose that I did write an op-ed piece when Quality Metrics first came out, and saying that I was in full support of not only quality metrics, but for us to have report cards issued by product and by plant, so consumers had the transparency to determine what is the best product and what they're willing to pay for. So saying that, you'll kind of know where my presentation's going at this point in time. So I always say this, guys, right? We serve patients. That's our job. That's our privilege that we have. If there wasn't a patient, there wouldn't be a need for any of us in the room to work for the companies that we work at. And serving those patients is a privilege that is granted to us by society through through marketing authorizations, through licenses. And that privilege can be revoked at any time. Right? And that's why having a good quality system and a quality culture is so important, so we can live up to those responsibilities. And I'm going to say strategy is important, and we need a good strategy, how to make an effective quality system, how to implement a quality culture, right? But culture eats strategy every day, right? So you can have a great quality system, but if you don't have a strong quality culture, your quality system will be ineffective, right? So it's really important to do that. I'm not the first person to say it. There's a book actually written about quality culture. I do a lot of benchmarking, and maybe some of you have heard me talk about benchmarking. And I said, who would I benchmark about a quality culture so I could have this conversation today and share my thoughts? And I thought I could go to the electronics industry, go to someone like Apple or Intel. Both have high quality products, strong quality cultures. I can go to the electronics to the auto industry, and you talk about Ford and Toyota. Or I can go to the aviation industry and talk to Boeing or Airbus. All of them produce high quality products using a quality culture. But then I realized I'm not just the head of quality at my company, right? I'm the head of quality, environmental health, and safety. So I have the safety organization as part of my group. And I look at our industry, right? As an industry as a whole, we have one of the best safety records when you compare industry to industry. And then I started to think, how's that possible? What are the factors involved in that? And then I said, you know what? Of my entire team, only about 5% of those people work in EH&S of my entire team. So I say, why are they more effective in creating a safety culture in my organization than the quality unit, which is 95% of what I do, effective in creating that quality culture? And I started to think about what are the differences, right? The safety team focuses on behaviors, right, and modifying behaviors. And we focus on different things. We're not necessarily focusing on behaviors, right? We focus on test and test results, inspections, non-conformances, CAPAs, compliance. So I think there's a message there. I think Guy said it great today, that OSHA, which regulates the safety end of our business, regulates in a different way. And maybe the FDA can benchmark with other regulatory bodies that regulate different industries, like the aviation industry or the safety industry, and say, what are their best practices? What do they do to become successful and do it better and faster than maybe our regulatory system does on drugs? But one thing I'll tell you that they do in the safety world is they actually encourage and reward self-reporting. So we have a program at Amgen, it's called C-Cards. It's not something we invented, we adopted it from the oil and gas industry. And a C-Card is if I walk around and I see something that potentially is a safety hazard, I'm required to do something about it. So that can be as simple as my colleagues walking down the stairs and talking on their cell phone. And I stop my colleague and I say, it's really not safe for you to be talking on your phone as you're walking down the stairs. You could hurt yourself, or you could hurt me. Please, could you stop? Or if there's an extension cord on the ground that someone can trip over, you don't leave that location. You get someone come and fix that, right? Do we do that in the quality world? Right? And when we do things like that, we turn them into deviations or nonconformances that require major investigations. And then investigators come in and criticize us for having the deviation or the nonconformance. There's a difference there, and it drives different behaviors. I think we should think about that. We should be aware of that. There are 4 essentials to drive a quality culture. This is not my magic thought process, but the Harvard Business Review study that Eric also referenced, I will reference in my thing. First is leadership emphasis. Then is the message credible? Do you encourage peer involvement and engagement? And do the employees own it? Right? So the Harvard Business Review said 50% of creating that quality culture is due to executive leadership. That starts at the top from the CEO. And my presentation is how do you build that quality culture on the floor, right? You can't do it without the CEO's involvement and supporting what you're doing. And I'm going to talk about how you get his involvement. I think that's important. Is the message credible? 10% of what, if to be successful, is going to be, is that message credible? But more importantly, is the messenger credible? Right? When I get up and say we need to do this because we serve patients, serving patients is a noble cause. That message is credible. But am I credible when I say it? Do I walk the talk? Do I say today, serving patients is what we do, and then tomorrow I tell someone to do something that violates that premise? Right? You got to walk the talk. 40% is due to peer involvement. Right? You have dedicated leaders by title, and then you have the silent leaders who are the people respect, who are their peers, right? You need to understand who those people are, and you need to get their buy-in so they then engage their peers. And finally, the employee involvement constitutes about 20% of that message. So when you think about walking the talk and leadership engagement, has to come from the top. You have to get the CEO to do that, right? And there's clear indications if the CEO is engaged. Now, I think Russ mentioned earlier today, let's have the CEO sign the 1,300 annual product reviews that Mylan has. And that would show engagement, no doubt about it. But if the CEO actually signed 1,300 annual product reviews, and the ones I have to review are like this thick, I would say that the CEO is just pencil whipping it and really not being engaged. Is a better measure how often does the CEO meet and for how long with the quality leadership team? Is that a better measure of engagement? Or what does the CEO say at an all-staff meeting? Does he start every all-staff meeting talking about compliance, quality, and safety? Or does he talk about numbers only? So what is the measure of CEO engagement? But clearly it has to come from the top, and there has to be no mixed messages, right? CEO can't say quality is bedrock, and then the next day say, well, you know, we can't afford quality, let's cut 20% of our headcount, right? The message is mixed and it won't work. And you have to walk the talk. And I want to talk a little bit about how we walk the talk at Amgen. We have a process called Purposeful Presence on the floor. It involves the visual factory that Eric talked a lot about. But first-line managers have a role. And their role is not to sit in an office. It's to be out on the floor with their employees and be part of the process, listening to their employees, listening to the equipment, looking for weak signals so that they can prevent problems. And we take this so seriously that every executive in the company, within operations and our CEO, is required to go to our manufacturing locations and walk the floor, doing purposeful presence. And we give them cues and procedures and processes on how to do this. And our CEO, when he goes to, let's say, our Puerto Rico facility, spends 3 or 4 hours walking the floor, listening to the operators, asking them questions, looking for weak signals, and reinforcing that quality culture. Right? It's real important. This is a really important piece, right? It reaffirms walking the talk. When I go to a plant, I spend an entire day doing nothing but walking the floor. Right? And it's a hard process to do, but it's an important process. And then message credibility. What more powerful message do we have that we save lives? What more noble cause in the world is there to treat and cure grievous illnesses? What more powerful message is when you bring a patient in and the patient talks about how your medicine changed their life? We've all seen that. We have a powerful, credible message. I just ask you to be credible when you say it, right? Go back to walking that talk. So how do you create that credible message? It's clearly, you have to align your verbal and nonverbal language. We had a safety event in one of our R&D labs where we, to be honest, quite lucky that 3 individuals are still here today. They could have very easily had died in that event. And that was a wake-up call to our R&D organization that they needed to really embrace laboratory safety. But not everybody in the R&D organization embraced that. And one of the senior leaders in that organization and I went to the site where this event happened, and he then went to talk about the importance of safety and following procedures in the laboratory around handling combustible materials. And as he was saying how important it was, he kind of was rolling his eyes and going like that. So did they hear that safety was important, or did the audience hear that this was bullshit? Right? I mean, you have to have your verbal and your nonverbal cues to be aligned. Right? You lead by listening. It's easy to talk. I do it for a living. It's harder to listen and to hear what people have to say and what they need to be successful. And you need to be realistic, right? I would love to say I'm a Six Sigma company and we never make mistakes. And if I made that our goal for this year, we would fail. And once you fail, you give up in a lot of cases. So you have to put goalposts, milestones to achieve that Six Sigma objective so people feel they're making progress, right? You have to, what I call progressively conditioning them so that they don't know you're making them be Six Sigma. You're doing it in little bite-sized increments, and one day they look up and say, we have the Six Sigma process. How did that happen? You have to be realistic. You have to speak with passion and from your heart, right? It just has to, you have to be something you believe in. And if you don't believe in quality is the right thing to do for patients, then you shouldn't be making pharmaceutical products. You should go make cars or something else, right? Be yourself is important. Be the expert. Be honest. And be proactive. Don't go out and talk about a quality culture after there's a problem. Be proactive. Do it on an ongoing, continuous basis. This is a journey that never ends. So encourage peer involvement, right? It's clearly a delicate balancing act, right? But clearly what we want to do is put social pressure into the peer community. So they feel that they're doing this to help not only the patient, but to help their colleagues. And that if they fail at this, they've not failed me, Martin Van Trieste, they failed the patient and they have failed their colleagues, right? And create friendly competitions for the benefit of the patient so that it encourages that entrepreneurial competitive spirit we have all the time in this country. I'll give you a great example of a case study, right? Hitachi Global Storage Technologies, right? Where they went and created a way of creating that peer pressure, that social architecture by just having, on a routine basis, quality boards in hallways, highly visible hallways, where people got to say what they did and what their accomplishments were. And of course, they got recognized for that. So there was a competition to have the best board, to have the best project, right? And it was clear that it was having positive results, right? So those are the kind of things that you can do. But it was interesting when a new executive came to the company, he kind of thought that whole stuff was, foo-foo, right? But at the end of the day, he saw the results and became a convert. These are the kind of things that we can do to build that quality culture. And of course, employee ownership. And we talked about a lot, round tables, Kaizen events, the visual factory. All of those things are extremely, extremely important, right? As Guy said, right, Henry Ford said, I guess, is you have a quality culture when someone does the right thing when no one's watching, right? And that's what employee ownership is. They're an owner in the process. They feel accountable for that. And clearly, here are ways to increase ownership. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's really about decision-making and empowerment, right? You don't just tell people, I'm delegating the work to you. You have to delegate the decision rights and tell people they're accountable for those decisions and provide feedback to people on a routine basis if they're doing good or not. And accountability doesn't mean I'm going to fire somebody if they make a bad decision or poor judgment. Accountability means they realize they own that decision and they come forward and they say, I made a bad decision, but don't worry, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to fix it, I'm not going to let it happen again, right? Accountability is that kind of stuff. And most importantly, solve problems, right? Don't point fingers at problem makers, right? Usually in my long life here, and every year in quality is like 7 years in the real world, you know what? Most of the time it's not a person who fails, it's the management system that has failed, right? And to pick on Mary Malarkey a little bit today, hopefully she's still in the room, and I say this before, but how many people have seen a 483 or a warning letter where the first sentence is, the quality unit failed? Right? Did the quality unit fail? Did they make the product the wrong way? Did they produce non-sterile product? Did they not implement the corrective actions in time? No. But what happens when the quality unit fails? I bet you the FDA people will tell you they've seen responses where we fired the head of quality at the site. That's not going to fix the problem. Quality guy didn't make it wrong, right? It's management with executive responsibility that failed, right? We start writing that in warning letters, we'll get more CEO involvement. We start saying manufacturing had failed to fund the process properly, you'll start getting better actions. We have to change the way we talk. Now, I know the FDA has limits to them based on what's in the regulations, but saying the quality unit fails fires the head of quality. at a site, in a department, at a company. That doesn't solve the problem. Next guy will have the same culture to deal with. We need to bend the culture. So I benchmark a lot. I had a lot of opportunities to benchmark with the U.S. Nuclear Navy. Forgive me if you've seen this slide before. I like to use it. I got to spend 3 days at sea on a nuclear aircraft carrier studying their quality system. I got to fly onto the aircraft carrier and fly off of the aircraft carrier, which was probably the greatest experience of my entire life. Also the scariest one, more flying off than landing. And I got to spend 2 days at sea on a nuclear attack submarine, which was also a really cool thing. But I learned a lot from the Navy. Because in the Navy, they deal with the nuclear Navy. They have nuclear reactors, nuclear weapons, lots of people who are under 20 years old running all that equipment. Not experienced people like us, young people, under 20. And they have loaded firearms on board all the time. And they look at things in a way that we should think about. They identify risk in various levels. And when they say it's a critical risk, that means whatever happens is one, instantaneous and irreversible and can have deadly consequences. So for example, I have a firearm and I pull the trigger. The result is instantaneous. The bullet comes out. I cannot catch the bullet and put it back into gun. And if I hit you, it is deadly, right? So they then take that as a risk and make it foolproof that no one can have a loaded firearm who's unauthorized at an unauthorized point in time. And they build systems so you don't hear about one sailor accidentally shooting another sailor on a nuclear submarine or an aircraft carrier. And you don't hear about a nuclear weapon being launched inadvertently at one of our friendly enemies. You don't hear about those things because they take it, and that's where they focus all of their resources. But I also will tell you, you talk about a nuclear aircraft carrier, it's a floating city. There's 5,000 people on board. And the average age is 20 years old. The average age. And it's about the size of a couple city blocks, and it goes 30 plus knots in the water, and it doesn't stop or turn instantaneously. And you go onto the bridge of a nuclear aircraft carrier, and the one I was on, and when I went to the bridge, a young lady who was about this short was driving the boat. Actually, the wheel to steer the boat was bigger than the lady driving it. And she had total control of the lives of 5,000 people. Now, how did she do that? And those are some of the things I learned. So one thing they do is high reliability performance. This is a way of training people that's more than you just follow your operating procedure. And let me tell you the steps you have to go through. I'm going to teach you about the operating procedure, but I'm going to teach you about the science behind the operating procedure. How does this boat actually work? How does the propulsion system work? How does the steering mechanism work? And more importantly, what they teach is what can go wrong and how you should respond when you go wrong. I would challenge us to say, does our training programs do that? And then if they do, I challenge you again, do you test people to see if they can do that successfully? They test in the Navy, right? They give them written tests and oral exams. And the oral exams are done by their peers and their superiors. Right? They do a thing called defense in depth. And defense in depth is related to equipment. How do I know my equipment's going to perform reliably? What are the critical components? What are the critical maintenance I need to do to the critical components? Where do I need to train people using that equipment versus high reliability performance? What can fail on that equipment, and what do I need to do if it does fail? A much different way at looking at maintenance and operation of equipment. Now it's going to change about 10 times. Knowledge management is key. We talk about that a lot. I'm not going to go through that. I'm looking at my time. And a repeat back process. So remember the little lady, 18-year-old, driving a 50,000-ton boat at 30 knots in the ocean that doesn't respond instantly? One of the reasons she's successful is there is a very specific process to give orders, to accept orders, and to execute and to verify the orders. And it goes like this. The commanding officer on the deck will say to the helmsman, turn the boat to 180 degrees. Not 180, right? 180. Then the helmsman doesn't repeat back exactly what they said. They repeat it back in a question. Sir, do you want me to turn the boat to 180 degrees? And the commanding officer then reaffirms, yes, I want you to turn the boat to 180. We've tried this experiment at Amgen, and it's amazing how fast we reduced human error from failing to follow procedure. Simple process like that. Cost us nothing to do. Absolutely nothing. 2 guys were there anywhere, verifying and done by in a workflow, in a batch record. So things we can learn from other people. And that actually the Navy practices Lean Six Sigma kind of techniques that we do also. So the way you sell this to executives, the way you sell this to the company, is you have to speak the language of the CEO and of the finance people. You have to speak in financial terms, right? So in that Harvard Business Review, there's a great example where the average mistake costs you 2 hours in time. And Mary said today earlier, time is money, right? And Mary said today, we've talked about this, 10 years ago, and we're still talking about it today. Dr. Deming talked about this 40 years ago, and we're still trying to figure out how to do this in our industry. We need to change the way we speak. We need to pick the right words. So clearly, average time and fix mistakes, 2 hours. The average hourly wage in a manufacturing environment in the United States is $42.55. If a company has 26,300 employees and people make one mistake a day, that comes out to like $774 million to resolve errors, right? And the Harvard study, and this is not my data, it's Harvard, so it should be credible to your executives. For every 5,000 employees, for a company of 5,000, for every 5,000 they have, if you can go from the bottom tier to the top tier in preventing errors, you'll save $67 million annually. Right? That's impressive, right? That's impressive. Now I'm going to show you my data from Amgen. Over the last 10 years, we reduced errors as we classify them as non-conformances per lot. We reduced errors by 96%, right? We did that at a time when things were expanding and complexity was growing at the company. But that saved the company over $400 million. So when I talk to my CEO, I say, yeah, boss, here's the update of this chart where, we continue to reduce errors and I continue to save you lots of money. Right? And he believes it, right? I can show him the proof. He believes it. I also show him a chart that I'm not allowed to show in public, but I'll explain it to you. I go and I compare Amgen to our peer companies. Lilly, Glaxo, Genentech, Roche, et cetera, and I go look for any warning letters, seizures, recalls, safety events, OSHA violations, OSHA fines, and I plot those versus their ability to supply every patient every time. And there's an amazing correlation. The companies that have problems have the most back orders. And the companies that have the least problems have no back orders, have no drug shortages. Direct correlation. If you want to talk to your CEO about true revenue, tell him you can't produce or sell the most profitable product in your company because you have a warning letter, or it was an import detention, or you had a fire in your plant that burnt down the filling line that fills that product. We say that'll never happen, right? We heard about it today. Someone talked about a micro lab burning down. I think it was Gerald. Right? Disposition cycle time went down 64%. And that's money. Time is money. Time is inventory cost. Right? Another way to talk to your CEO. We reduce scrap by 92%. Scrap, rework, rejects. Very powerful tool. all the financial performance that an improved quality system and a quality culture generates. But you have to talk to your finance people and your CEO in their language. You can't talk to them in our lingo because they might not understand. It might not be meaningful to them. You have to talk in their language, right? And we did all of this. It lowered our manufacturing costs significantly. We did this while sales were increasing. Global geographical footprint was increasing. We were decreasing our headcount, and cost, just money fell out of the trees. Money just fell out of the trees. And I think Eric kind of will tell you the same thing. We didn't go after this to save money. We got after this to ensure a robust supply chain. Right? Operational excellence is the tool we also use at Amgen. It's very closely modeled to the Toyota system. That organization reports to the quality unit. They report to me. We went after this to do things right the first time, not to save money. And the money that falls out of the trees is just amazing, absolutely amazing. You just have to sell that. And we have a robust and reliable supply chain, right? And really why we do that, we have a motto at Amgen, every patient, every time. And those patients we know are our colleagues, our friends, and our loved ones. And every time I travel, if I have my little Amgen backpack, it never fails. Someone comes up to in an airport and hugs me and thanks me for saving someone that they know. And we should be proud of what we do. What we do is really hard, but really hard things that have noble causes that do great things are why I get up every morning, and I hope you do too. So thank you very much.